Hello, let me continue the session here. Coming to variable scope, right? So redeclaration, as I already told you, you cannot redeclare the let and const variable, but you can redeclare the var variables. So next one is variable scope. One more important concept is in the case of var doesn't have block scope as you know. So var has a functional scope. It doesn't have a block scope, but inside the function, whatever the variable you declare, that comes under functional scope, function scope. But var has a function scope, but it doesn't have a block scope. So here, the great example is you can see here the function greeting. So inside this function, you can see the var greet is created, and your console log the greet inside the function. So this part of the code will execute perfectly, and this part will not execute. Why? Because because you are trying to access this greet variable which is inside a functional scope, right? But var has a function scope. Let me run this part of the code in Chrome browser. So, the console here. So next I'm going to call this function greetings, right? So function greetings, sorry, greet is not defined. You will get a reference error. Why? Because greet is not defined. Your console logging it outside the functional scope. That is why you are getting the reference error, right? So that is the major difference. One second, let me execute this again. Sorry for the inconvenience. Let me go to the developer tools here. Sorry. Let me just execute this part of the code. That's it. I will call the function here before. Now I will just console log again the greet. Just observe this. The first console log will work. What is this? Why it is printing? Because when you call the greetings function, this function will be executed, and this console log will be executed because it comes var is already declared inside the functional scope. So when you console log this good morning, it will come. Again, when the function is called after this execution, this will happen again. You are console logging the greet which is under the functional scope. So there you will get one reference error because greet is not defined, because where has a functional scope but it doesn't have a block scope. So I will give you the proper example. I'm declaring the x variable is here. So I will create a block scope if true something. It's difficult. You're console logging this x inside a block scope, right? You will get a 10 because var doesn't contain a block scope, right? So if you do the same example with a let or const, let me declare it as a let, you will get a reference error, syntax error. Identifier x has already been declared. Sorry, I have to create a new thing. Let me go to the developer tools here. Okay, let me go to this. I'll change this to let. We'll get a reference error here. One second. Let me give a proper example for the block scope. So sorry, my bad. I'll give you the proper example. It doesn't have a block scope. Let me go to the example. So here you can see the block scope of the var. So you are running the for loop. You are declaring the var keyword here, and you are running the inside the loop. So for every iteration, it will print the value, and when you console logging the number outside the block scope, you will get the same thing. So for the first iteration, it will print 1. For the second iteration, it will print 2. Third iteration, 3. And when it comes to the sixth iteration, the number will be increased to 6. Then you are console logging the same number variable. So you can console log it, and it will print 6 here. So in case of just observe let and const, it doesn't have it has block scope. So what happens is, when you do the same thing using let, so 1 times it happens, after 5 times it happens, you will get a reference error because you are accessing the number with outside the block scope, because let has a block scope. So outside the block scope, if you're trying to access the let or const variable, you will get a reference error. Number is not defined. So let me execute this part of code in the Chrome browser. Get us some good idea over here. You can see here in the sixth iteration, it will throw a reference error. So this is the difference. So var has a functional scope, but it doesn't have a block scope. But let and const has a both functional scope as well as a block scope. So that is the major difference between const, let, and var. So you have to understand this. So this is about const keyword. You can declare using const keyword. And one more major difference between the const and let, I will tell you this. So re-declaration is different and reassignment is different. When you try to redeclare var variable, it will override it. But redeclaration is not at all possible with let and const, right? But there is a major another difference. You just hear this. Reinitialization is possible in case of let, but it is not possible in case of a const. Are you getting it? That is why it is known as a constant variable. You cannot reinitialize the constant variable. That is a very important thing. You cannot reinitialize the constant variable, but you can reinitialize the let variables. So I'll give you one example here. Where is that? Let me go and give an example. Okay. So I'll give you a let number is equal to some 200. You are declaring initializing it, and again you are reinitializing the same number to 300, right? When you console logged this number, I'll open a new tab here. It will get printed, 300 will be printed, right? So what happens is reinitialization is possible in the let key for the let. For the same example, I will use a const. Just observe it. I'll just tell this number 1 or something. Const. So when you try to console log the number 1, just see what happens. So you will get a type error, that is nothing but assignment to constant variable. You cannot reassign the constant variable. So hence in the industry, whatever the variables they are declaring, they use most of it as a const, so that Nobody will reinitialize the values. So in most of the insurance or banking projects you take, I worked on, most of them will use const. In case of a let, they will just use when they want to modify all those datas, they will use let variables. Most of the people will use const in the JavaScript. So this is the major difference between the let, const, var. Let me summarize. Before that, we had studied hoisting. What is a hoisting? Hoisting is nothing but a mechanism or a behavior where the declarations of the functions and variables will be moved to the top of the scope. And with in case of a var, there is a proper default initialization is undefined. Let and const, there will be not a proper default initialization. There, let and const will be in the form of a temporary dead state. That is what it is known as a temporal dead zone. So another difference is var doesn't have block scope, but let and const have a block scope. Another major difference is whenever you create a global variable using a var keyword, it will be added to the property list of the global object, that is a window object. Whenever you declare the variable using a let and const, then it will be not added to the property list of the global object. Three major differences. One more difference is redeclaration is not at all possible in case of let and const, but redeclaration is possible in case of a var. So these are the 4 to 5 major difference between let, const and var. So this is very important. So yeah, this is the major difference between the let, var and const. This is what I wanted to cover it in this session. So thank you so much. Hope you liked it. Keep supporting me. Thank you. Signing off.